one of the ways that I like to foster developing trust is by asking really good, intelligent questions that allow us to differentiate ourselves and highlight our specific advantages and unique capabilities. And developing that trust through asking those questions and probing with intention makes a buyer feel heard and understood, but also relevant.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, it's Cory here with one quick update before we get into today's episode. You see, I was so excited to speak with Roland and Tony that I forgot to give you the context around our conversation. Roland's company, GHD Digital, had just returned from the Stevie Awards for Sales and Customer Service, where they won an incredible 3 Silver Stevie Awards for Sales Management Team of the Year, Government Sales Team of the Year, and Achievements in Value-Based Selling. So rest assured, this next 30 minutes is going to be jam-packed with insights from an industry-leading expert. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Cory, and today we have with us 2 guests I'm really excited to talk to. The first is Roland Griesmayer. He's a strategic and growth-focused revenue leader currently serving as the head of revenue of GHD Digital, the digital services arm of GHD, which is a powerhouse in engineering, environmental, and construction solutions. With a track record of scaling sales orgs across multiple revenue stages, from 0 to 5 million, from 0 to 20 million, and from 20 to 140 million, Roland brings deep experience across SaaS, the public sector, and professional services. He's held senior leadership roles at Birdview PSA, Infotech Research Group, and Tyco, amongst others. He's known for his ability to drive results and empower teams to win. We're also joined by Tony Cascio, a sales and leadership expert with over 25 years of experience guiding executives and entrepreneurs to unlock growth. He's an executive advisor at Cascio Group, where he helps founders and go-to-market leaders align strategy with execution. As a managing partner at ValueSelling Associates, Tony leads sales transformations for companies ranging from startups all the way to Global 500. Applying the value selling framework he mastered during his 18-year career at Gartner. He also serves as a senior advisor at Mars Discovery District, mentoring high-growth ventures on scaling for long-term success. Roland, Tony, welcome to the show.
Awesome to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get into it, and I'm going to start with you, Roland. So you've had a fascinating career, starting at companies like Xerox and Tyco to leading sales at GHD Digital, and now as the head of revenue, really being responsible for the entire revenue function. What initially attracted you to the world of sales leadership, and how did those early experiences shape your philosophy?
Yeah, great question. I would say it probably all started at Xerox. Xerox is known for, their big sales engine, their sales training. I got my start in sales in general at Xerox, or corporate sales at Xerox. And I always tell this story to my younger reps on, why, or how I got started into sales leadership. So I had won some monthly or quarterly sales award. I was a top rep for the quarter. And one of the prizes of that was I got to spend a day with one of the senior vice presidents of Xerox on sales calls. So this person came down and we booked 5 or 6 meetings for the day. And this is back pre-pandemic, a while back. And we were actually doing in-person meetings at these big corporations. And so I had this, big wig from Xerox with me, young sales guy and full of energy, but no real process to what I was doing, right? So I remember I was on top of the world, and we were sitting in my car or his car, and we were going over, what we were going to do. And he was asking me all these questions, and it came to light that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And how unprepared I was for all of these big meetings that I brought him to. And I don't want to say he tore a strip off me, but he tore a strip off me for not being prepared for that meeting or for those meetings in terms of who I was talking to, company size, what challenges we're going to be solving. And I remember how I felt that day and how unprepared I was and what a big impact that was on my sales career. And I always said to myself, I want to make an impact like that on young sales reps that are coming up and are hungry and eager. And, he did it in a very professional way, but I felt the pain of, a real senior leader at that time and how I should be conducting myself in meetings and stuff like that. So I would say that's what got me very interested in leadership roles and how I wanted to influence, again, younger reps, moving into their sales career. So that's the story I always tell my reps as well.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. And I feel like these may years later to be able to put that into practice and to go out and, do the same thing. It's a really good way of mentoring and giving back. And Tony, I want to get to know you, or help our audience rather get to know you a little bit better. So you're leading expert in value selling, and it's a journey you started back at Gartner. When you were first introduced to this approach, what clicked with you and what made you decide to, go all in with it as a career?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I had used value selling for over 18 years in a variety of roles. Naturally, it first started when I was an individual contributor in a sales organization at Gartner. But then as I found myself navigating my career, whether it was sales management, sales leadership, corporate roles at Gartner, I always found the principles to be very simple, really focused, and I could consistently execute them in a very value-oriented way that allowed for me to have deep conversations, build relationships. And I just felt like my credibility was starting to really skyrocket in my career because I was using this consistent approach. So value selling's been in my blood for over 20 years, and it's helped me on my journey in countless ways. So I'm grateful for value selling in so many ways.
That makes a lot of sense, especially the immediate applicability of it, the way to drive value in all the different conversations. And if I'm remembering correctly, we were chatting a little bit beforehand, and this is your third time you two pairing up together, is that right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's we've been fortunate enough to be together in 3 different organizations, or we've partnered together. And I think that also speaks to the relevancy of, if you're a leader that's really trying to drive steward leadership, the principles and guidelines of value selling are really applicable, whether you're, a traditional hardware, software, SaaS, product-led growth. The applicability has really been across industries and sectors. And that's one thing that, Roland's definitely proof positive of that. And I've been fortunate enough to ride his coattails of success over the last several years.
Yeah, for sure. And so as it seems like we're going to get into value selling a lot, I kind of want to start there. And so going back to the more generic concept of value-based selling, and it seems like that's definitely been a core part of your career, Tony. And as Tony just mentioned, Roland, right? Like you've done this in multiple different industries to great success. So I'd love to hear from you first, Roland. Can you break down what value-based selling means to you, not just as a methodology, but as a mindset?
I always bring a few quotes in my pocket to these things and to my reps. There's a few that I always remind them of, and the one that I love most, and it really I would say aligns to value selling the best, is money follows problems, right? And value selling, it's business issues, right? So I think in our world, when we do gong call reviews and we review reps, discovery calls and demos, definitely the first question I always ask is, what problem are we solving, right? Like, what's the main business issue? What is our product going to solve? And if they can't answer that, then I would say we don't have a legit opportunity in play. And this is for all, right? Gong call reviews, forecast meetings. If you can't articulate what problem you're solving for the organization you're talking to, you have some work to do. And I think it just helps us as sales leaders validate our pipeline on where it is, where it's going, and really where it's been, right? So there's so many great things that value selling's done for myself as a leader, for our reps and our organization to be able to accurately forecast deals, right? I think, as I would say, a good example at GHD, we've been hitting quota for, I want to say, we're about 5 or 6 straight quarters in a row now where we're accurately forecasting, I want to say to the dollar on what we're going to bring in that month. So again, it's not all value selling, but value selling is definitely the backbone of how we sell, how we forecast our pipelines to the ELT, to executive leadership team at GHD in Australia. So it's definitely given my CEO, Ali, confidence in my abilities, my sales team to accurately forecast again to her executive leadership team.
Wow. At first, that's impressive. And second, I think you just made a lot of our listeners jealous, especially the revenue leaders out there forecasting to the dollar. So, Roland, you mentioned that value selling was obviously a big part of this, right? But there are other things at work. I mean, you haven't Gong, you haven't forecasting, but what are some of the other pillars that you've put in place to maintain that incredible level of consistency and success quarter to quarter?
Yeah. So again, great question. Again, I don't know if this is what your rep or your listeners want to hear, but we do really try to keep it simple, right? We don't want to over engineer our sales cycles. We don't want to over engineer the way we do our core business. And, we want to give our reps the flexibility to sell the way they want to sell, but with guardrails in place like value selling. So we've updated HubSpot with our value prompter, with the value prompter. So our BDRs are filling out the value prompter once they've booked a meeting, and that just carries on through the entire sales cycle. And when we're doing deal reviews, if I open up a deal and it's empty, well, guess what? That deal's not getting forecasted, right? If it's up to date, if it's the information is concise and we're solving a problem and there's definitely something there, then it's a forecastable deal, right? So I think the other part of this is the incredible buy-in we've had from the entire senior leadership team, who I'm fortunate enough to work with every day. And Ali, our CEO, once a month we do a forecast review with her and the reps. So reps get and she uses the value selling terminology now as well. So she'll ask, what problems are we solving, business issues. It keeps the reps accountable as well. So one of the things, again, that I preach is being prepared for a meeting. You don't want to show up to one of our forecast meetings with Ali not prepared, right? Embarrassing. And we've had to stop meetings halfway through where reps aren't prepared, and we cut him off, and then we let the reps come. We cut off the meeting, and then we let the reps kind of think about what just happened. We'll rebook it, and then we'll do it all over again. But right, you don't want to be the rep who shows up to the forecast meeting with your CEO not prepared. So again, it's taught the reps to always be prepared, no matter what situation you're in. And so again, it's not over engineering. Be prepared and show up to all your meetings, in proper fashion.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic advice. And I want to highlight 3 things that I heard there, Roland. The first one was, keep it simple. Don't over engineer the sales process. Don't make it too complicated, right? And then get senior leadership buy-in, right? You're all talking the same language. It's coming from the top down. There's already a huge expectation set right there. And then 3, I love how you've managed to balance that expectation, right? Like, don't embarrass yourself in front of the CEO. And also, you still have the flexibility to sell how you want to sell. We're just giving you some guide rails for making sure you're on the right track.
I think, we want reps to be authentic, right? We don't want them to be reading a script. We don't want them being worried about what they're going to say. They know what their core responsibilities are when it comes to a discovery meeting, when it comes to a demo, right? We're going to review the call. So if you're all surface level questioning and you're not digging deeper, right? There's no mutual findings on both sides, right? There's no vision match from the customer and our side, right? You don't have a deal. And it's remarkable how that's correlated back for us to forecasting, right? If you don't have all these elements, and there's not a lot of them, right? There's not 30 elements that you have to be able to check the box on, but there's, I would say, 5 core elements. If you can check the box on it, it's a forecastable deal. We're good to go. And again, it's given Ali the confidence in us to be able to forecast those deals.
Absolutely. And Tony, what would you add to that as someone who's worked with Roland and has observed his process? Like, what makes this approach so effective across industries?
It's something I reflected on before we jumped on this call because I wanted to give it some thought. There are some things that I would say are very unique to Roland's leadership style and approach that have allowed us to see these benefits and these attributes. And I'll just lay out a couple of examples if you don't mind, Cory. The first one is, before we did anything with the sales organization, we did a leadership session, cross business, product, marketing, sales leadership, anyone who's involved pre, during, post sale, including the divisional CEO, came into this leadership session. And we talked about how do we go from command and control to trust and collaboration as a leadership team, as a group. Because if we can do that and we can behave that way and use value-based principles and guidelines, then it'll be easy for this to be something that works across the sales organization. So that was a remarkable exercise to do to get everyone to buy into it. And truly at a divisional level, they've bought into it in practice, not just theory. The second thing that I thought was unique was Roland said, Tony, go spend time with the CEO and work on the forward action plan. What are the leading effort indicators that we're going to marry ourselves to over the next 90 days after we do the workshops? And the 90 days became 180 days, became 365 days. And we had 3 to 5 focused leading effort indicators of the right behavior and attitude that would drive the performance-based culture. And that's all we ever talked about. It became our religion. If you wanted to know if someone was doing good or bad, it was very binary. You just looked at the leading effort indicators and the progress that we were tracking and how we got to being able to have results and outcomes. So it was very consistent, very focused. And I think Roland's unique circle of leadership is he surrounds himself with people that help elevate not just himself, but the team. And he's got a very sales-centric focus where sales is at the center, sales is the hub, and everyone else is supporting or the spokes connected to that hub that are there to help sales be successful. And it creates a real true win organization. So I think that's why you've seen some incredible, fantastic results with this approach of inspiring versus inspecting internally and within the sales organization.
I love it. I think I want 2 of your quotes from that on a t-shirt. Inspiring instead of inspecting, and then command and control to trust and collaboration.
Get those royalty checks ready. Here they come.
Love it.
We'll see what we can do about it. And, Tony, you mentioned seller behavior, right? And how crucial it is to track those leading indicators. And you had 3 to 5 that you're constantly looking at. And like you said, it was pretty binary. Are you doing X? Are you not doing X? And how do we get back on track? So looking around that and looking, maybe widening the scope a little bit and thinking in terms of behavior, buyer behavior, we all love to say it's changed so much over the last 5 years, and it has. And I think the pace of that change continues to accelerate. What would you say makes this value first mindset or this value-based approach so relevant right now? Is it that changed buyer behavior? Is it the economy, market saturation? I'd love to hear from both of you on this. What's really driving that in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know if it's really ever changed. I think a good example that I can give you is, when you get on a call, when you get on a discovery call with a prospect, I would say 90% of the time they want to talk about your features and your features of your product, right? And then you end up down this road of feature, we can do this, and you're not solving. And I want to say in our world, our CMS might be easier to use. And then we come across this all the time. So I would say all the time, but we come across this all the time where the reps will be like, the communications or IT guy loved it because it's easier to use. And I'm like, what problem are we solving? Like, easier to use is not a problem that we're solving. If if that communications person or that IT person is going to go and ask for $75,000 for a new CMS, the city manager is going to ask, why are we ripping and replacing? Well, it's easier to use. And, 99% of the time, that person's going to they're going to be told to take a hike, right? Go fly kite. We're not spending $75,000 of city money, taxpayer funded money to go get you something easier to use. Right. So that's the example that I always use. If you can't clearly articulate a business problem we're solving for that community, whether it be an economic development or tours, some kind of revenue that, that municipality or government agency is going to benefit from, you're most likely not going to get a deal, right? Or it's going to be a very long, drawn out sales cycle. Again, not forecastable. And this was the issue 2 years ago for us, is that we weren't solving problems. We were winning deals just based solely on functions and features, and we weren't forecastable, right? And again, we brought in the lovely Tony Cascio to help with that, and it's made the world of a difference for us. And reps are truly understanding what it is to really solve a problem for a community, and our key personas, again, IT or communications. So to me, that's value-based selling. And to me, again, I don't feel like it's changed over the last 5-10 years. This is just the world we live in.
I love it when someone tells me something different. Keep down that track. And I think you're right to an extent, right? We all talk about these small changes in behaviors, but they want to see the feature. They want to see the product. And at the end of the day, that's not really going to lead to a sale. And it's not going to lead to their success either. So I think you're right
and if
on.
you don't take command, to be honest, if you don't take command of that sales cycle or that meeting, the prospect's just going to lead you down the road of features and functionality. It'll be compared to our competitors, and then it's a price bake-off, right? We're not solving a problem. It just becomes a price discussion all over again.
For sure. Tony, what would you add to that?
Well, first of all, I've never been called lovely before, so I'm glad that someone's called me lovely.
I just spent 3 days or 2 days with you in New York City, so now I can call you lovely now.
That's true. I'll take that. I think from my experiences, I would say that it's evolving. I would say that buyer expectations continue to evolve. And the evolution that I see is that our buyers want to do a couple things with us. The first one is they really want to understand that we're in it for the long haul, that we're actually going to help them move beyond implementation and deployment past steady state, and we're actually going to help them continue with their gains and productivity and help them achieve those actual objectives that they had in mind. And they care less if you're an established or an emerging vendor. What they care about is that level of commitment that you have to the likelihood of their success. So I think that's one evolution that I've definitely seen over and over again. And I think the second evolution that I've seen in the buyer is no longer a buyer. A buyer's is the norm. There's a plural reality that says, even though you're working with an individual or a group of individuals, understanding each buyer's responsibility, expectation, their definition of value, both professionally and personally, and taking those people's individual buyer preferences and putting each buyer first, and then collectively putting that together to tell a unified story about your impact or your desired outcomes really helps supercharge you or turbocharge you as a standout vendor in a crowded space. So I think the evolution in buyers is happening. I think part of it is our interpretation from the seller's side of the equation, but I think that buyer evolution will continue with headwinds, macroeconomics. We'll see what the mid-year budget review and allocation looks like for some projects that were forecasted in the portfolio. But I think the buyers will always evolve. And I think that's just part of what happens when you take a look at these major buying decisions that happen.
Yeah, it certainly seems like more and more people are getting involved. And like you say, they want a partner for the long haul. They just don't want someone who's going to make the sale and, throw the ball over or spike the ball over the net to customer success and then call it a day. And I think it comes down to trust, building credibility and trust. And Roland, it goes back to something you said earlier. I'd love to zero in on this a little bit more because I'm really struck by how you allow that freedom and that empowerment amongst your teams to build credibility and have that authenticity, but also, you're making sure they put their best foot forward. So, in your opinion, what are some of the best ways to, build that credibility, and maybe what are some pitfalls that leaders should watch out for when they allow their teams that enable them to have that freedom?
Yeah, again, great question. For me, again, credibility, it just goes back to being prepared, right? And I'll always use this word, and this is just what I hammer into my reps as well, and it's just ingrained into me now. So you'll hear me talk about being prepared, and that's, to me, if you're not prepared for the call, you've lost credibility right off the hop, right? You come up to you. I remember in the early days when we were doing gone call reviews, the rep asked the prospect what their role was in the organization, and I couldn't help but just cringe. And right, it was a great teaching moment, new rep, and again, that's the impact that I wanted to make on reps as well. And like you got to be showing up to those calls prepared. You got to know who you're talking to, their revenue, right? Like you have to know that organization inside and out, right? So that, to me, that's where credibility starts, is right off the hop. And value selling, we talk a lot about credibility stories, right? So being able to speak about your past experiences, talking, I've talked to your peers about X, and telling stories, and, telling or selling isn't telling, right? Like you're not telling, right? It's this whole notion of, sales is really being able to speak of a story elegantly, and just creating that credibility through stories, right, in your past experiences. For me, that's where credibility starts, is right from the onset of that call. Being prepared, knowing who you're talking to, and then being able to tell those credibility stories along the way.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Tony, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think it takes time, right? I think people rush sales motions and sales cycles too quickly and leave buyers confused and frustrated at times. And that's why your likelihood of a purchasing decision diminishes, to be honest with you. So I always say, look, there's three principal tenets of establishing a relationship. The first one is, can you establish rapport with the buyer? Which means, do you have the capacity to shut up and listen?
My favorite one. It's my favorite. It's my favorite one. And yeah, again, this morning we did a call review, and one of my feed is it's a repeat call review with a rep, and they were so eager to show me the rapport building that they did, and it was awesome, right? They went and researched them. The lady that he was talking to owned her own, I think it was like a microbrewery in the city. So they were business owners, and they hit it off, and the relationship just got off to such an awesome start from the onset, because the rep just built that credibility. And I love, and I always harp on it with my reps. It's one of the biggest things. I'm like, what are you doing for rapport building? And our number one rule for rapport building is you can't talk about the weather. So you can't, I'll scold the rep every time. So how's the weather in Minnesota today, right? It's like, so no weather talk, you come prepared, but it's such a good takeaway, Tony. I love it. And I think I learned that one from you from the Infotech days.
That's cool. So yeah, establishing rapport through your ability to listen and learn, and then developing trust. And one of the ways that I like to foster developing trust is by asking really good, intelligent questions that allow us to differentiate ourselves and highlight our specific advantages and unique capabilities. And developing that trust through asking those questions and probing with intention makes a buyer feel heard and understood, but also relevant. Like, I'm relevant here in building the solution. You're not just going to pitch me a whole bunch of generic options and scenarios for me to pick and choose from, which creates anxiety and friction. And then the last thing is, if you establish rapport and you develop trust, you cement your credibility. And the only way to cement your credibility is to play back a solution offering in the customer's own words, using their requirements and their needs to accelerate a decision, and why you are a standout vendor, not a stand-in vendor amongst other people that are proposing a solution. So to me, those are the three tenets that really, if you do those well in a value-based selling motion, you definitely are improving your odds in the purchase likelihood, but you're also putting the customer first in every step of the journey.
Nope, couldn't agree more. You have to cultivate that buyer agency, and you have to have them as an active participant. You can't just drag them along. They have to be building the case with you for sure. I'd love to switch gears a little bit and dive into the specific challenges that you were facing at GHD and how you overcame those, Roland, because it's a really fascinating story. You essentially built a high performance SaaS startup inside of this global construction engineering firm. What was that journey like? And when you started out, what were the problems you identified?
I think that's what drew me to the opportunity when I first got here is that, GHD has this long-standing history, 100-year-old company, mammoth in the civil engineering world, water, waste, transportation. Again, globally known, right? And then there's this small startup products and platforms within GHD Digital that's trying to make a name for themselves in the GovStack world or the CMS world and the procurement world. Yeah, super interesting. When I got here, no defined sales roles, right? Everybody was an account manager, everybody was an sales executive. Everybody wrote RFPs. Everybody did everything, right? There was 2 or 3 people that really did everything that a sales organization would do, but it was on the backs again of 2 to 3 people, right? So I would say, lots of business risk from that standpoint. If somebody leaves, if somebody, right, no knowledge sharing, again, no real defined commission plan. It was a half baked out commission plan. So again, those were the no sales methodology. Again, I'll add to that is, no clear way of selling. I would say they weren't even professional salespeople that, were running the organization. They were project managers, they were experts in government in their domain, but they weren't salespeople. They didn't have the training that, they weren't equipped with, again, how to solve business problems and that. So I would say there's a mountain of hurdles that, stood in front of us to where we are today. So, first thing we did was we separated roles. So we have now dedicated account executives. We have dedicated account managers. We now have an amazing proposal RFP team. So there's clear revenue streams of where revenue is going to come from. If one falls, the other one picks up, right? So we'll have months where AEs are killing it and the other ones fall off, and where the AMs are, smashing their quota, the AEs might be behind. So again, it allows us to always be consistent. There's always one group that's really doing well, and then the other 2 are kind of following behind. But the clear revenue streams, the clear roles and responsibilities from the reps, that to me was kind of the first order of business, and just getting that all aligned and in place. Once we had that, Tony was nice enough to send me, I think, like 5 or 6 value selling books. So we started when we started our value selling journey here, he sent me these books, and we had like a study group where I got the reps to 1 week we'll go away and read chapter 1, and we came back and we talked about it, and we didn't have, at that time, we didn't have the budget to do the workshops and the whole, big Tony Cascio productions. So we started small, and we gradually got everybody talking the same language in place. We then included senior leadership into that mix. I had to really work hard on bringing a competitive commission structure in place where, if we were going to attract top talent, we wanted to pay top dollar, right? That's just the nature of the beast. Is if we're going to attract top talent and awesome salespeople, we do need to be paying them fairly. So again, with the support of Ali and my senior leadership team, Cody was a big part of that. We are now, I think, at a point where we have a really competitive commission structure where, no fault of their own before, but the GHD, the engineering group, doesn't operate like that, right? They've never seen a commission structure where reps are paid out on every deal, and just a different world. And now that we have all that in place, the commission, the team structure, the other one was that I had to kind of work hard for was the BDR support, the SDRs, right? Like, how are we going to create enough opportunities for these reps to thrive and hit quota? There's only so much. All of our reps are encouraged to build their own pipelines, right? That's a given, but we need to be filling their funnels, right? So again, now we have a full SDR function. We really feel, and we are truly now, I would say, at a point where we call ourselves a real sales organization. So, and again, that's almost 2 years to the day where we're at now, and we're thriving and hitting quota like crazy.
Wow, that's an incredible transformation story. And
Yeah.
Tony, I'd be curious to get your take on this. So obviously, Roland and Ali and the team over at GHD have done a tremendous job with what was a huge change management initiative. In your experience working with companies that maybe don't pull it off so well, what are some pitfalls that leaders should be watching out for?
I think if you're not, it's a change management event to your point, Cory, but with any program management, the adoption and reinforcement has to be institutionalized at the very beginning in order for it to stand up. Roland, I don't know if you remember this, but before we did any work, I sat down with Roland's divisional CEO, Ali, and we put together our forward action plan. Here's the leading effort indicators that we're going to measure, monitor, refine, and adjust our progress every 90 days. And we shared that with every leader in the leadership workshop. We asked every leader to come back to us with how they're going to contribute to that. And then we reported on that on a regular basis, on a routine basis. And, Roland had enough trust in our partnership that he would let me go talk to his CEO once a quarter. And when I got together with Ali, the only thing we looked at was the metrics. Where are we green? Where are we red? Where do we need to tweak? Where's there variance? Where do we need to adjust? And it became our guiding light on how do we go from good to great as a sales-centric organization. I think that's the other thing I would highlight here. GHD was a very product-centric organization. It was proud of its products. It was proud of doing RFPs and bids and tenders. But there was a mindset shift that had to occur in order to become more sales-centric across the entire business unit. In other words, Roland really challenged the status quo of why do we wait for RFPs? And why do we go on government bid sites? What could we be doing proactively? How do we foster multi-threaded relationships with our buyer personas that really keeps us relevant and top of mind so that we can get engagement and activation happening way before an RFP happens? So again, there was a couple of things there that I thought were really, really unique. And if I can, the last thing I'd say is, and Roland mentioned this earlier, imagine doing deal reviews on your top growth deals and your CEO is using value selling terminology and guidelines and principles. And Roland knows this. I gave his CEO what's called a forecast checklist. Here's the top 10 things that you need to sniff out when people come to you on a deal review. And Ali uses that top 10 list as a litmus test, as a sanity check when she's in these sessions. So to actually CEO use it in practice to forecast back to the headquarters is remarkable. So yeah, there's some definite uniqueness about this approach. It wasn't a training program or a sales methodology. This was really a program management change to go from product centricity to sales centricity using a value-based approach across every business unit. And it's still growing. It's still evolving. It's been a great ride the last 2 years, but we know there's a lot more ahead of us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. As we move toward the end of the podcast, there are 2 questions that we ask every guest. And because there are 2 of you, I am going to flip a coin and split them up here. Roland, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to give you the tough one. All right. We're recording this in April of 2025. Fast forward to 2030, right? 5 years into the future. What is a shift coming for the sales leadership world that not many people are talking about right now?
I think with the emergence of AI, I've heard a lot of chatter on LinkedIn and over the internet about how AI is taking over coaching reps, and to me, I love the human element of coaching, right? So I never want to lose sight of that one-to-one coaching with your reps. So I would say that's the biggest thing for leaders to be on the lookout for. AI is going to be awesome. It's going to do great things for coaching, and it's going to do great things for us. But let's never lose the human element of coaching. I never want a robot or Gong or whoever to be coaching my reps for me, right? Those coaching opportunities are priceless. So to me, I never want to lose sight of really that human element of coaching and being able to connect with your reps on a human level.
Yeah, I think it's crucial advice because, like you said, there's going to be a lot of the burden of coaching that AI can take over, but you never want to lose that human connection, because that's what's going to really enable that behavior change, that you're going to trust that person, trust that leader, and that's what's going to motivate it. Okay.
Yeah.
Tony, I got the last one for you, which is, let's go back 5, 10, even 15 years in the past. What is the one piece of advice that you would give your younger self from a career perspective, and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, if I went back 10, 15 years ago, I think my one piece of advice I would give myself is to just be more curious and spend more time in understanding how things come together in organizations and what's the collaboration that happens between business units and departments and organizations. Because I think, 10, 15 years ago, there was still a lot of siloed organizations with individual mission and purpose. And now, obviously, we live in a world where collaboration and trust is fostered throughout every organization that I work with now. But it's also the essential oil that's required to move agendas forward, to get projects and programs completed, to actually develop people and grow people. So I think that would be my one thing is, that would be the area that I would say I wish I would have done a little bit more exploration and curiosity, and not just observed, but actually posed more questions and been more deliberate and thoughtful about how to get curious around that.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining me on the show. Roland, Tony, if people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tony Cascio, or you could always flip me a note at tony.cascio@valueselling.com. And happy to address any questions, any points of view. If anyone's got ideas, suggestions, thoughts, knowledge is power, I believe, and knowledge and experience comes from collectively working with people. So thanks for your time, and I appreciate you having me come on, Cory.
Yeah, and I would say you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Any questions, concerns, or comments, would love to hear from you. Also, roland.griesmayer@ghd.com. Yeah, that's where I am.
All right. Thanks again.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.